Todd Geib was young, full of life, and had a bright future ahead of him. At 22, he was working a steady job, loved the outdoors, and was known for his friendly, outgoing personality. To those who knew him, Todd was the kind of guy who made friends easily and lived life to the fullest. But it was on the night of June 11th, 2005, that something went terribly wrong. Around 7:30 p.m. that evening, he left his apartment where he was living with his cousin to head to the Half Moon Bar and Grill. The plan for the night was simple. Todd would meet up with some friends for dinner and drinks, and then head over to a party at an apple orchard in Casnovia, Michigan. At approximately 9:30 p.m., Todd and his friends left the bar and hopped into a friend's car for the short trip to the orchard, just a mile and a half from his apartment. When they first arrived, the party was fun, but as the night wore on, the atmosphere began to shift. By 12:45 a.m., things were getting out of hand. What started as an argument quickly escalated, threatening to turn into a full-blown brawl. For Todd, that was enough. He had no interest in sticking around to see how things played out. Deciding to leave, Todd set off on foot, making his way toward home. At some point, he pulled out his phone and called the friend who had driven him there, but the call went to voicemail. In his message, Todd sounded calm, even casual, saying he was going to walk back to his apartment. It wasn't unusual. After all, the distance wasn't far, and Todd knew the area well. No one thought much of it at the time. Then something strange happened. Between 12:47 and 12:57 a.m., Todd made a series of phone calls, short, cryptic, and deeply unsettling. In one call, he reached out to a friend and simply said, "I've had enough." In another, his message was even more alarming. "I'm in a field." And then, silence. The call abruptly cut out. Worried, his friend called him back. The phone picked up, but Todd didn't speak. Instead, all she could hear was something strange on the other end, either heavy breathing or the sound of rushing wind, before the line went dead once again. After that, there was nothing more from Todd, no more calls, no more messages. By morning, concern had turned to urgency and a massive search effort was launched, one of the largest the area had ever seen. Nearly 1,500 police officers and volunteers scoured the orchard, the party site, and the stretch of road Todd would have taken to get home. Even aircraft were deployed, sweeping the landscape from above. They didn't search just once. They combed the area 3 times, meticulously covering every inch. But there was nothing. No footprints, no clothing, no phone. It was as if Todd Geib had simply vanished into thin air. Then, on July 2, 2005, 3 weeks after his disappearance, the body of Todd Geib was found. His remains were located in Ovid Hall Lake, just 2 miles from his home, right in the middle of an area that had already been searched extensively. But it was the position of his body that baffled investigators. Todd wasn't floating face down, like most drowning victims. He wasn't tangled in debris or trapped beneath the water's surface. He was found standing upright in the lake, his head and shoulders breaking above the water, as if he had simply paused mid-swim and never moved again. It was as though he had been placed there. Even more bizarre, he was fully clothed. His wallet was still in his pocket. There were no immediate signs of struggle, no obvious wounds, no explanation for why he had ended up there in the first place. An autopsy was conducted on Geib's body, and while no external injuries were found, one detail stood out. His blood alcohol content was 0.12, a level that suggested he was quite drunk at the time of his death. With this information, authorities quickly ruled his death an accidental drowning, likely caused by his inebriation. The theory they had was simple. Todd had attended the party, became heavily intoxicated, then wandered off, perhaps not fully aware of his surroundings, and ultimately ended up in the lake. It seemed like a reasonable explanation, a tragic accident, nothing more. But as with many unsolved mysteries, the simplicity of the conclusion doesn't always tell the whole story. There are lingering questions that refuse to be swept away by the official ruling. For some, the official story doesn't add up. The unexplained phone calls from Todd, his body found in a previously searched area, it all suggests that maybe, just maybe, there's more to Todd Geib's death than meets the eye. When Todd's mother, Kathy, saw a recovery photograph of her son, she immediately disagreed with the local law enforcement's theory of a drowning. The photo of his body, pulled from the lake after weeks of being submerged, struck her deeply. And the more she thought about it, the more her doubts grew. In her mind, there was no way her son could have been in that water for 3 weeks and remained in the condition that he was found. An independent investigation into Todd Geib's death was launched by forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Sikarica, who meticulously analyzed the available photos and autopsy data. What he uncovered shocked those still searching for answers. Despite Todd being missing for 3 weeks, Dr. Sikarica concluded that he had only been dead for between 2 to 5 days. The timeline didn't add up. If Todd had been in the lake for 3 weeks, his body should have shown signs of much more advanced decomposition. Further investigation revealed even more troubling discrepancies. The autopsy report noted that Todd had no water in his lungs, a crucial detail that would be expected in a typical drowning case. Even further, there were several signs that suggested Todd's body had been placed in the water after death. The decomposition was only moderate, far less than what would be expected after such a lengthy time submerged. His clothing was surprisingly clean, with very little evidence of the algal biofilm, often seen on bodies that have been in water for days or weeks, normally coating drowned victims. There were no traces of insects, no debris, no sand, as would be typical after being submerged in a body of water for any significant period. Perhaps the most peculiar detail was that Todd's body was found floating vertically in the lake, an extremely rare occurrence in drowning cases. Most bodies float horizontally, but Todd's had a position that suggested something far more unnatural. Dr. M. Eric Benbow, a forensic biologist from Michigan State University, who also re-examined the case, would later remark on the state of Todd's body, noting, "There should have been more biofilm, more slime buildup. The other thing, it looks like part of his head was exposed. There should be insects in the clothing, even in the mouth, in and on the ears, in the folds of the skin. That's where these flies will typically lay their eggs. They've evolved to be attracted to dead things within minutes to hours, to a day. We saw none of this in Todd's shirt. Carcasses are consumed pretty quickly and dramatically. If a body was here, it would be colonized with some type of aquatic insect. I find it very surprising that Todd's body had no reported insect activity, and the clothing had no algal development. Based on our study, it is unlikely that his clothing and his body had been in for 21 days. The evidence from the independent investigation painted a disturbing picture. Todd's body had likely been placed in the water just days before it was discovered, casting serious doubts on the official ruling of a drunken drowning. This new theory was backed by forensic experts and only further fueled the suspicion that Todd may have been murdered. Despite the mounting evidence, the Michigan State Police never reopened the case, much to the frustration of Todd's family. Todd's mother, Kathy Geib, has tirelessly fought to have the case reopened, but each time authorities have rejected her plea. Another team of investigators, including former New York Police Department detectives, along with criminal justice professor Dr. Lee Gilbertson, have taken up Todd's case. After reviewing the evidence, they've come to a chilling conclusion. Todd may have been abducted, held somewhere for a period of time, and then murdered before being disposed of in the lake. They also suspect that Todd could be one of the victims of a chilling theory, the smiley face killers, a suspected network of serial killers targeting college-aged men, abducting them, and then leaving their bodies in nearby waterways. At many of these crime scenes, investigators have found smiley face graffiti, thought to be left behind as a signature of the killers. One of the most perplexing findings by this group was the presence of 2 antidepressants in Todd's system, amitriptyline and disipramine. Neither of these drugs had ever been prescribed to him, and there's no clear explanation for their presence. In their pursuit of the truth, the team of investigators met with pharmacist David McDiarmid to dig deeper into the strange presence of antidepressants in Todd's system. McDiarmid, a seasoned professional in the field, explained that the combination of amitriptyline and disipramine would not normally be prescribed together. In fact, when taken in tandem, these medications are known to cause serious side effects, including confusion, agitation, and even hallucinations. McDiarmid went on to explain that such drugs could easily be slipped into a drink, leading to an overdose or incapacitation. With the evidence in hand, they all concurred. The levels of these drugs found in Todd's system would have rendered him completely incapacitated, unable to move, let alone travel the distance to the lake. It was increasingly clear that Todd had not drowned by his own doing. Something far more sinister had occurred. Determined to get answers, Kathy Geib and investigator Kevin Gannon took their findings to the Michigan State Police, demanding that they reopen the case. They were able to secure a meeting with the Muskegon County prosecutor to present the new evidence, hoping it would compel authorities to reconsider their conclusions. But despite all of this new information, Todd's case remains unsolved. To this day, his family has not received the justice they so desperately seek, and the true cause of Todd Geib's death remains a haunting mystery.
Earth is littered with artifacts that have been left behind, fragments of lost civilizations, and whispers of forgotten knowledge. Written in stone, carved into bone, and molded by hands long forgotten, some of these objects tell stories we understand, while others defy explanation. Today we'll look at another 5 mysterious artifacts that makes us question how early humans created these intricate pieces of history so long ago. We'll start with the mysterious Venus of Tantan, a possible early depiction of the human form, before looking at the incredible possibilities of the Geib flute, believed to be the oldest musical instrument ever discovered. Then we'll investigate the ancient cryptic runes of Norway's Svingerud stone and the puzzling engravings on the Ashango bone, an artifact some say holds the origins of mathematics. And finally, the unexplained components that helped create the red Peruvian death mask, an object that continues to raise questions. These artifacts challenge everything we think we know about the past. Together, let's discover who created them, what they were used for, and most importantly, the information they can give us about our shared history and the history of the planet. Join us as we explore another 5 of the most mysterious ancient artifacts ever discovered on Fireside Unsolved, Episode 148, 5 Mysterious Ancient Artifacts, Part 6. In the arid landscapes of Morocco, a small yet intriguing artifact was uncovered in 1999, sparking debate ever since. Dubbed the Venus of Tantan, this stone object, though only 6 centimeters long and weighing a mere 10 grams, has made a significant impact on our understanding of ancient human history. The discovery took place during an archaeological survey along the Dra River, near the town of Tantan in Morocco. While the exact age of the artifact remains uncertain, some experts suggest it could be between 300 and 500,000 years old. Even more than its age, what makes this artifact so intriguing is its blend of natural and potential human influences. Its shape, which seems to include features like arms and legs, is largely the result of natural geological processes. However, the presence of horizontal grooves suggests that there might have been some human intervention. Studies have found traces of iron and manganese pigments on the stone, hinting at an early attempt to enhance its human-like appearance. If these pigments were applied intentionally, it suggests that early humans might have recognized the stone's resemblance to a human form and sought to emphasize it, possibly to give it greater significance or meaning. This act of applying pigment to the stone indicates a level of cognitive development and symbolic thinking, showing that these early humans were capable of abstract thought and had a desire to represent or highlight certain forms or ideas. Despite these intriguing possibilities, the original findings have not been re-examined by other scholars, and the alternative view suggests that the rock's shape might simply be the result of natural weathering. Either way, the Venus of Tantan invites us to consider the cognitive abilities of our distant ancestors and the beginnings of artistic expression. This is the story of the Geib flute, a piece of cave bear femur with holes that some believe to be the world's oldest musical instrument, possibly crafted by Neanderthals. This artifact was found during excavations of Geib cave in Slovenia in 1995. The bone was unearthed in a cave located 230 meters, or around 750 feet above the Adricha River, a site rich with archaeological finds. The bone was found in a level associated with Neanderthals, and initial radiocarbon dating suggested it was around 43,000 years old. The artifact was tested again later, this time using electron spin resonance, and the age of its creation was revised to between 50,000 and 60,000 years ago. Ivan Turk, who led the excavation, proposed that the bone, with its strategically placed holes, might have been a musical instrument. If true, this would show a level of cultural sophistication among Neanderthals that was previously unrecognized. However, this interpretation is not without controversy. Some experts argue that the holes could have been made by animals biting or chewing the bone, rather than by human hands. Nevertheless, the Geib flute challenges our understanding of Neanderthal capabilities, inviting us to reconsider their cognitive and cultural complexity. Humanity has always sought to leave its mark, carving words and symbols into stone to preserve thoughts, beliefs, and identities. And our ancient ancestors were no different. In 2021, archaeologists in Norway unearthed an extraordinary artifact near Tyrifjorden in the municipality of Hol, Buskerud. What they found is now known as the Svingerud stone, a slab of brownish sandstone, roughly 31 by 32 centimeters, or approximately 12.5 inches, etched with mysterious symbols. When it came to putting an age to the stone, radiocarbon dating revealed something astonishing. The runes carved into this stone were written sometime between 1 and 250 CE, making it the oldest runestone ever discovered at over 2,000 years. This single artifact shattered previous understandings of the origins of runic writing in Scandinavia. The Svingerud stone was carved in Elder Futhark, the earliest form of the runic alphabet, predating most other runestones by centuries. But the most intriguing discovery lay in a sequence of 8 legible runes. The runes spell out Idibarug, or perhaps Idibara. Scholars debate its meaning. Maybe it was a name, perhaps even a dedication, possibly a family name, or maybe it has a meaning of something else entirely. Unlike the towering Viking runestones from later centuries, the Svingerud stone was found in a cremation pit, suggesting it may have been part of a burial ritual. Its placement among the remains of the deceased hinted at a sacred purpose, perhaps a final farewell, a name inscribed to be carried into the afterlife. As researchers examined the stone further, they made yet another discovery. The inscriptions were not all made at once. Some carvings appeared to have been added later, suggesting that the stone may have been deliberately repurposed over time, its significance evolving with each burial. Though the Svingerud stone was briefly displayed to the public in early 2023, much of its history remains locked in the past. With each discovery, researchers edge closer to unraveling the origins of runic writing, a script that would one day be used to chronicle Viking conquests, tell heroic sagas, and mark the graves of warriors and kings. But before all that, there was this, the Svingerud stone, a single stone buried for nearly 2 millennia. A message carved by unknown hands, a glimpse into the distant past, waiting to be understood. Between 1991 and 1992, in Peru, a tomb was excavated, found to contain the remains of a middle-aged man, 2 women, and 2 children, all arranged in specific positions. The head of the man had been detached from the body and placed facing upwards, and his body was deliberately positioned upside down. A vast number of other treasure was present, including 100 personal items made from a 14 or 18 karat alloy of gold, silver, and copper. One of these items was a deformed gold mask on the head of the man. The tomb was dated between 900 and 1100 AD and credited to the Lambayeque culture. Funerary masks were common to these ancient people, and they were characteristically coated with red paint, and some paint chips were collected for analysis from the mask found on the deceased man. The components of the paint were analyzed, and the findings were unusual, to say the least. The majority of the paint came back as corresponding to proteins from human skin, keratin, and saliva. It is possible that these originated from human contamination during excavation and handling of the mask, so they were discounted. However, some of the remaining proteins are found in human blood, strongly indicating the presence of human blood in the red coating of the mask. Given the apparent application of blood on the mask, it suggests that it could signify the life force which the people at the time believed would help the rebirth of the deceased person, who was a member of the elite. This is supported by the arrangement of the female bodies in the tomb, representing a midwife aiding a woman giving birth. Archaeologists believe the discovery has the potential to both complement and support existing theories, as well as provide new information about the way people lived their lives in the past. The Ishango bone is one of the most fascinating and mysterious artifacts ever discovered, offering a glimpse into the early cognitive abilities and intellectual practices of ancient humans. Found in the 1950s, near the headwaters of the Congo River in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the Ishango bone is believed to date back to approximately 20,000 years ago, during the Upper Paleolithic period. At first glance, the artifact appears to be a simple piece of bone, but upon closer examination, it reveals a remarkable feature: a series of notches carved along its length. The bone is made from the fibula of a large primate and measures about 14 centimeters in length, or 5.5 inches. The groupings of notches seem to correspond to multiples of 5 and show a degree of complexity that points to an early form of numerical thinking. Scholars have speculated that the markings on the Ishango bone could be an early form of mathematics, possibly indicating that prehistoric people had a rudimentary understanding of arithmetic, multiplication, or even division. Some researchers believe the notches may represent a lunar calendar, marking the phases of the moon, while others suggest the marks may be associated with counting or tracking the numbers of animals hunted or resources available. In addition to the main notched section, the Ishango bone has a sharp tip at one end, which is believed to have been used as a tool for scraping or engraving, further suggesting that it had practical uses alongside its potential symbolic or mathematical significance. Although its exact purpose remains speculative, the Ishango bone challenges the conventional understanding of prehistoric societies, showing that even in the Paleolithic era, there may have been a deeper understanding of mathematics and the natural world than we previously thought.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's episode, The Unsolved Disappearance of Andrew Gosden. During the course of creating this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking directly with Andrew's father, Kevin Gosden. He asked if I could share an important message, one that could make a real difference. If you're a young adult struggling with something in your life, feeling lost, or even considering going missing, please know that help is available. Before making any decisions, reach out. There are people who care, who want to listen, and who can help you find a way forward. If you need support in the UK, you can contact the Missing People Helpline at 116-000. In the US, you can reach out to 1-800-THE-LOST. These numbers are completely confidential, free, and available 24/7. Andrew Paul Gosden, affectionately known as Roo by his family, was born on July 10, 1993 to Kevin and Glenys Gosden. Along with his older sister Charlotte, the family lived in Doncaster, South Yorkshire, England. As Andrew entered his teenage years, he was described as a bit of a loner, preferring the solitude of his bedroom, where he immersed himself in video games and music. His father, Kevin Gosden, recalled Andrew as deeply introspective and thoughtful. He was almost never moody, rarely having an outburst, and had an air of quiet maturity beyond his years. Teachers described him as reserved, highly intelligent, and brilliant in the subject of mathematics, a young man with a future full of promise. As the long days of the 2007 summer faded into memory, Andrew Gosden stepped into a new school year. In the days leading up to his disappearance and the first couple weeks of school, Andrew broke from his usual routine. Twice, instead of taking the bus home from school, he chose to walk the 4-mile journey home, a decision that, even at that time, puzzled his parents. The evening of September 13, 2007, was normal, with seemingly nothing out of the ordinary. The Gosden family shared dinner. Andrew spent an hour with his father, working on a jigsaw puzzle, and then he joined his mother to watch a few comedy shows on television, laughing as if nothing was amiss. But then came the morning of September 14, 2007, and something felt different. For the first time in recent memory, Andrew struggled to wake up. Normally punctual, composed, and self-sufficient, he seemed unusually irritable. His mother took note. It wasn't like him. Something was off. At precisely 8:05 a.m., Andrew Gosden stepped out of his home for what should have been an ordinary school day. A family friend, Reverend Alan Murray, spotted Andrew from a nearby park bench, watching him as he made his way toward his usual bus stop. But instead of boarding the school bus, Andrew took a different path, to a nearby ATM. After arriving at the ATM, Andrew withdrew 200 pounds from his bank account, almost everything he had. Shortly after, a neighbor's CCTV camera captured Andrew returning home. What happened next suggested careful planning by Andrew, yet left behind a trail of still unanswered questions. Andrew arrived back home, and once inside, he placed his school uniform in the washing machine. His blazer was neatly draped over the back of a chair. He then changed into casual clothing, a black slipknot t-shirt and black jeans. Next, he packed a bag. The bag, adorned with patches of his favorite rock and metal bands, held only a wallet, keys, and his PlayStation Portable console. That was all he took. His passport remained on the shelf, as did a stack of birthday money, about £100 in cash. Both were left behind. Andrew hadn't packed a coat or sweatshirt, and he didn't pack the charger for his PlayStation Portable. At approximately 9 a.m., Andrew Gosden left home for the second time that morning. A neighbor's CCTV camera captured him walking down Littlemore Lane at 9:05 a.m. Andrew was on his way to Doncaster railway station, and when he arrived, he made a curious decision. Approaching the ticket counter, he requested a one-way ticket to London, a journey of around 150 miles for £31.40. A return ticket was only 50 pence, less than £1 more, yet Andrew insisted on the one-way, single fare. At 9:35 a.m., Andrew boarded the train bound for King's Cross Station in London. He traveled alone, blending in among the morning commuters. A fellow passenger sitting beside him later recalled his quiet demeanor. He barely spoke, absorbed in his video game as the world rushed by outside the window. Back in Doncaster, however, his absence at school did not go unnoticed. His teachers attempted to contact his parents, intending to alert them that he had failed to show up for morning classes. But a simple clerical error led to a devastating delay. The message was mistakenly left on another student's parents' phone. Andrew's family spent the entire day unaware that he had never arrived at school. That evening, the Gosden family sat down for dinner, assuming Andrew was either in the converted cellar, playing video games, or upstairs, perhaps doing homework. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. There was no reason to suspect anything was wrong. But when Andrew failed to come down for dinner, they checked his room. Empty. They searched the cellar. Nothing. At first, they rationalized his absence. Maybe he had lost track of time at a friend's house. Maybe he had gone for a walk. But as calls to his friends and neighbors came back with the same answer, no one had seen him. The worry deepened. Then came the revelation that changed everything. His fellow students hadn't seen him all day, and they finally learned that Andrew had never even been to school at all. By 7 p.m., the Gosdens contacted the police. In a desperate search for answers, Charlotte and Mr. Gosden retraced Andrew's usual route to and from school, scanning the streets, calling his name into the fading light. But the streets were empty. The answers they needed were nowhere to be found. 3 days after Andrew Gosden vanished, a critical clue surfaced. Police, after questioning staff at Doncaster railway station, confirmed what the family had feared. Andrew had traveled to London. The ticket seller remembered him distinctly, noting that the teenager had declined a return ticket, despite it costing only 50 pence more. This detail stood out to investigators. It even stood out to the ticket seller. But to Andrew's father, it wasn't necessarily suspicious. Andrew had acquaintances in London, places he could have stayed overnight. With this revelation, search efforts shifted to London. At first, the family focused on areas where they had relatives who might have seen or heard from him, but no one had. In the following days, the Gosden family traveled to London themselves, taking matters into their own hands. They distributed flyers and posters across the city. Meanwhile, South Yorkshire police worked to track his movements. They urged British Transport Police to review CCTV footage from King's Cross Station, where Andrew's train had arrived at 11:20 a.m. on September 14th. But in the crowds of people, he wasn't immediately identified. For 3 agonizing weeks, the investigation stalled, until a second, more detailed review of the footage revealed a breakthrough. On September 14th, 2007, at 11:25 a.m., Andrew Gosden was spotted on CCTV leaving the main entrance of King's Cross Station, stepping out into the heart of London, alone. This was the last confirmed sighting of him. With no further leads, police and the Gosden family began exploring a disturbing possibility. Maybe Andrew traveled to London to meet someone. But as they scoured his home computer, gaming consoles, and online activity, no messages, no chat logs, no trace of secret conversations were found. There was no evidence that Andrew had planned to meet anyone. With no new sightings, no communication, and no known motive for his trip, Andrew Gosden had seemingly vanished into thin air. Unlike most teenagers in 2007, he had little to no presence online. He never used the home computer to go online, and his father later confirmed that Andrew didn't even have an email address. He hadn't set up online accounts on his Xbox or PSP, and he showed no interest in social media. Investigators even reached out to Sony HQ using the unique serial number of Andrew's PSP to determine if he had interacted with anyone through the device. Once again, they came up empty. The investigation returned to the obvious question: why had Andrew traveled to London in the first place? One of the theories suggested by his family was sightseeing. Andrew had always loved London. He had visited often with his family to see relatives and friends, and he had a particular fascination with museums and exhibitions. At the time, bus travel in London was free for children, meaning he could have easily navigated the city on his own. The Gosden family considered every possibility, and another theory stood out. It was possible that Andrew traveled to London for a music concert. On the night of his disappearance, several concerts were within walking distance of King's Cross. Could he have planned to attend one, blending into the crowd unnoticed? Mick Neville, a retired head of the Metropolitan Police's Central Images Unit, found this theory plausible and urged anyone who had been at those events to check their photos and videos. If Andrew had been there, perhaps he had been captured in the background. The Gosdens would later express frustration with the initial police response, claiming that investigators focused more on the family rather than expanding the search beyond King's Cross. As the months passed, possible sightings began to emerge. Of these, Andrew's father found 2 or 3 particularly credible. The most compelling lead placed Andrew at a Pizza Hut on Oxford Street on the day he vanished, just an hour's walk from King's Cross. But to the family's frustration, they claim this lead was never properly pursued by police. More sightings trickled in over the following weeks. On September 17, 2007, 3 days after his disappearance, Andrew was reportedly seen again on Oxford Street. The next day, someone matching his description was spotted sleeping in a park in Southwark. Then, on September 19th, a boy resembling Andrew disembarked a local train from Waterloo at Mortlake Station. Witnesses noted that by this time, he appeared to have acquired warmer clothing. A month later, on October 17th, a woman in Covent Garden approached a boy who bore a striking resemblance to Andrew. When she mentioned that he looked like the missing boy from TV, he quickly denied being Andrew and walked away. But the most mysterious lead came in November 2008, over a year after Andrew disappeared. A man approached Leominster Police Station in Herefordshire, using the intercom to say that he had information relevant to Andrew's disappearance. But before an officer could arrive, the man had left the police station. Soon after, someone claiming to be this same man wrote anonymously to the BBC after Andrew's case was featured on The One Show. He detailed a possible sighting in Shrewsbury, also from November 2008. As the years passed, sightings of Andrew Gosden continued to surface from all across the UK. Reports placed him in a park in Streatham, South Wales, Birkenhead, and Plymouth. In 2009, 2 additional sightings were reported, one outside the Natural History Museum and another in a pub in Southend. But none of them could be verified. Andrew's father grew increasingly frustrated. He claimed that police failed to properly follow up on many of these leads, most notably the Covent Garden sighting. The woman who had spoken to a boy resembling Andrew was not interviewed until 6 weeks after his disappearance. Precious time lost that could have made all the difference. Then, in June 2018, a new lead surfaced. The Gosden family received a tip about an online conversation with a user named Andy Rue, a nickname eerily similar to Andrew's family nickname, Rue. This user claimed their boyfriend had left them and that they needed £200 for rent. When another user offered to help, Andy Rue responded that they couldn't accept money because they didn't have a bank account, explaining that they had left home when they were 14. Police investigated the lead, but frustratingly, the person behind the account was never identified. Andrew has several distinctive features that could help identify him. He wore strong prescription glasses, he's deaf in his left ear, and he has a unique double ridge on his right ear. If you have any information that could help solve the disappearance of Andrew Gosden, you are asked to call Crime Stoppers at 0800 555 111.
In a world where medicine has advanced beyond imagination, there are still cases that defy explanation. Patients who, against all odds, experience incredible recoveries or suffer from conditions that seem to exist outside the boundaries of medical knowledge. In this episode of Fireside, we'll explore the most perplexing and mysterious medical cases, stories that leave medical experts scratching their heads and challenge our understanding of the human body. From rare diseases with no name to sudden inexplicable transformations, these are the stories that continue to haunt the halls of hospitals from all over the world. Welcome to Fireside Unsolved, episode 150, 5 Unexplained Medical Conditions. Imagine waking up one morning only to find your eyes completely sealed shut, with no idea why. For days, you're left wondering when or if this strange ailment will end. After 3 long days and nights, just as mysteriously as it began, your eyes open again, like nothing ever happened. For Natalie Adler, a resident of Melbourne, Australia, she doesn't need to imagine it, she lives it. Unfortunately for Natalie, her condition has baffled doctors with an ailment so rare, she may be the only person in the world to experience it. It all began when Natalie was just 17. After battling a severe sinus and staph infection, she woke up to find her eyelids swollen shut. What seemed like a temporary reaction would mark the beginning of a medical mystery that has persisted for over a decade. Despite consultations with top specialists and medical experts from around the world, her condition remains unidentified, without a name, without a cause, and without a cure. Even after undergoing multiple surgeries in hopes of finding relief, the inexplicable episodes continued. Now, after years of failed treatments and unanswered questions, Natalie faces a heartbreaking reality. She has been left legally blind. When the episodes strike, her world goes dark. She can barely see through a small slit in her left eye, forcing her to strain for even the slightest glimpse of light. But the condition doesn't just rob her of sight, it brings pain. The night before it sets in, my eyes get heavy. That's how I know it's coming. When my eyes are shut, I feel a sharp pain on either side of my temples. My body aches, I feel nauseous, and my neck throbs from constantly tilting my head back just to catch a glimpse through that tiny opening. Doctors remain perplexed. No known illness causes a person's eyes to shut for days at a time, only to open again as if nothing ever happened. But Natalie's story isn't just about a medical mystery, it's about resilience. Living with an unpredictable, isolating condition has forced her to adapt in ways most of us could never imagine, shaping every aspect of her daily life, from simple tasks to social interactions. On the morning of October 14, 2013, Landon Jones woke up to a terrifying realization. He had lost all sense of hunger and thirst. 11-year-old Landon was dizzy, nauseous, and exhausted. His chest was heavy, clogged with phlegm he couldn't stop coughing up. The day before had been completely normal. He rode his bike, indulged in pizza and ice cream, just like any other day. But overnight, something changed. A chest X-ray eventually revealed a bacterial infection in his left lung. Doctors treated it, and for a moment, it seemed like the mystery had been solved. But this was only the beginning. What followed was a relentless series of doctor visits, medical tests, and dead ends in a frustrating search for answers. Because even after the infection was gone, Landon's hunger and thirst never returned. Desperate for answers, Landon and his family traveled to 5 different cities, consulting specialists from their local pediatrician to experts at the Mayo Clinic. He endured a battery of tests, spinal taps, brain scans, psychiatric evaluations, each one searching for clues. Doctors explored everything from digestive disorders to potential eating disorders, but every test led to the same conclusion. Nothing explained his condition. Ever since that lung infection, Landon has simply stopped eating. He never feels hunger. He never feels thirst. And because his body gives him no signals to eat or drink, he refuses to do so. One possibility doctors have explored is a dysfunction in Landon's hypothalamus, a tiny pea-sized region of the brain responsible for regulating hunger, thirst, blood pressure, and even sleep. It's also closely linked to the pituitary gland, which helps control the body's stress response. A malfunction here could explain his bizarre symptoms. Hypothalamic dysfunction can stem from a variety of causes: malnutrition, infection, genetic disorders, head injuries, even tumors. But so far, no definitive answer has emerged. One intriguing clue, however, lies in Landon's medical history. 3 years before his condition began, he started experiencing absence seizures, brief episodes where he would suddenly drift off, staring into space before snapping back to reality. It's possible that these seizures, or perhaps the medication used to treat them, are linked to his current health mystery. But so far, no one knows for sure. Imagine studying a disease so intensely that your mind starts convincing you have it. Every ache, every slight discomfort suddenly feels like a symptom. This is the strange phenomenon known as medical student syndrome, a condition where those learning about illnesses begin to believe they're experiencing them firsthand. Often described as a temporary kind of hypochondria, this peculiar syndrome has been documented for over a century. In 1908, renowned neurologist and psychiatrist George Lincoln Walton observed that medical students would frequently seek reassurance from their instructors, fearing they had contracted the very diseases they were studying. He described how simple knowledge could trigger alarm. Learning that pneumonia causes pain in a specific spot made students hyper-aware of any sensation in that area. Knowing where the appendix is located suddenly turned harmless twinges into terrifying warning signs. For some medical students, the anxiety doesn't stop when the textbooks close. It follows them into their dreams. A different study found that second-year medical students frequently dreamed of having serious illnesses, heart conditions, vision problems, and other ailments they had been studying. Their subconscious minds seemed to be echoing their waking fears. Psychologists suggest this phenomenon occurs because learning about a disease creates a powerful mental schema, a detailed representation of the illness, complete with its symptoms. Once this mental blueprint is formed, students may begin to notice real sensations in their bodies that match the disease, while disregarding anything that doesn't fit. The mind, in its effort to connect the dots, can become its own worst enemy. Yet intriguingly, other studies show a similar incidence of hypochondria in law students and non-medical students, raising questions about whether medical students are truly more prone to health anxiety than their peers in other fields. It seems that while the medical curriculum may intensify the fear of disease, it's not entirely clear if these students are more vulnerable to hypochondria, or if the anxiety is simply a part of the academic journey. Medical student syndrome is a powerful reminder of how the mind can play tricks on the body, and just how deeply suggestion can influence our perception of health. How would you react if you woke up one day and believed that parts of your body were missing, or worse, that you were dead? This is the terrifying reality for those suffering from Cotard's syndrome. It's a rare and chilling condition where individuals believe they no longer exist, or that they are slowly dying, sometimes to the point of thinking that the world they are living in is itself an illusion. With only around 200 known cases worldwide, Cotard's syndrome remains one of the most bizarre and perplexing disorders in medicine. For those who suffer from this condition, the sense of isolation is profound. Some hear disturbing voices telling them they are dead, while others simply can't find the will to live. It's a haunting condition that challenges our very understanding of the mind, reality, and existence. Cotard's syndrome can strike at any age, though it most commonly affects people in their early 50s. One chilling case from 2008 involved a 53-year-old woman who was rushed to the hospital after her family called 911. The woman, convinced she was dead, asked to be taken to a morgue, seeking the company of the deceased. The cause of Cotard's syndrome remains unclear, but it is often tied to deeper neurological or psychological issues. Rather than being a disease in itself, Cotard's syndrome is more accurately described as a symptom of another condition. Many sufferers have a history of mental health disorders, including schizophrenia, depression, or substance abuse. Some experts believe the syndrome is linked to two types of brain damage. The first alters how a person perceives themselves, while the second locks them into that false perception, regardless of evidence to the contrary. However, this theory is not universally accepted, leaving many questions about Cotard's syndrome still unanswered. In 1988, Tennessee police officer Gary Dockery responded to a call about a domestic dispute. But when he arrived at the scene, the homeowner greeted him with a gun and fired point blank into his forehead. The bullet, however, didn't kill Gary. Instead, it split into two fragments, one embedding in the left side of his brain, the other near the back. Emergency surgery saved his life, but also removed about 20% of his left frontal lobe. Severely brain damaged, Gary fell into a coma. Fast forward to February 1996, nearly 8 years later, and something unbelievable occurred. Gary had developed life-threatening pneumonia, and his family was faced with a tough decision: undergo risky surgery to drain his lungs or let him die naturally. Unable to reach a consensus, they decided to sleep on it, agreeing to return the next day to make a final choice. That evening, Gary's sister, Lisa, stayed by his side. The next morning, February 11th, 1996, Lisa was still in hospital room, as she had been countless times before, and began talking to her brother. But this time, she thought she heard something different. A faint response. She asked, "Did you say something?" To her shock, Gary answered, "Yes." In his brief moments of regained speech, Gary Dockery astonished his family. He recalled memories from camping trips, the names of his beloved horses, his green Jeep, and even told his sons, ages 12 and 20 at the time, that he loved them. News of Gary's miraculous response spread like wildfire. Television stations, newspapers, and news outlets across the country quickly picked up the story, captivated by the sudden revival of a man who had been in a coma for over 7 years. With this newfound hope, the family quickly agreed to proceed with the risky surgery to fight Gary's pneumonia. But as swiftly as it had come, Gary's ability to speak faded once again. Within days of the operation, he reverted to his previous state, unresponsive, back in a coma. A brain scan was performed, but it revealed no change, offering no answers, no explanation for the brief but mysterious return of Gary Dockery's voice. As the doctors scrambled for answers, they began to suspect that Gary's sudden brief recovery might have been triggered by a reaction to one of his medications. They pored over his medical chart, reviewing every drug he had been given: sedatives, antibiotics, anti-nausea medications, and anti-seizure drugs. They painstakingly tested each one, re-administering them in the exact doses as before, both individually and in combination. But despite their exhaustive efforts, nothing brought back his ability to speak. The doctors were left baffled, still unable to explain what caused that fleeting moment of clarity. The Mystery of Göbeklitepe. Sitting on top of a remote plateau in southeastern Turkey, Göbeklitepe looks over the vast Harran Plain. This region, known as the Fertile Crescent, was the cradle of civilization. Yet astonishingly, Göbeklitepe predates the first known cities, temples, and written records by thousands of years. First identified in 1963, the site remained overlooked until 1994. When German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt realized its true significance. Beneath layers of earth lay a labyrinth of towering megaliths, their surfaces carved with drawings of animals: lions, serpents, vultures, and scorpions, seemingly guarding this forgotten piece of the world. Dating back over 11,000 years to the pre-pottery Neolithic period, the sheer scale and craftsmanship defied everything we thought we knew about human capabilities at the time. To understand Göbeklitepe, we need to look closer into the lives of the people who built it. Who were these people? Archaeologists believe they were highly skilled craftsmen, astronomers, and spiritual leaders. And it would be a mistake to say that they were simply surviving. They were actually thriving, and in the process of creating complex structures. These people were transitioning, evolving, standing on the precipice of the Neolithic Revolution. Their diet included wild grains, legumes, along with the animals that they hunted. Some evidence even suggests they were experimenting with early domestication of plants. Shockingly, they were doing all of this without a written language, without towns or cities, and no known rulers. Instead, at least socially, they likely operated in small, tightly knit communities where cooperation was essential for survival. They relied on tradition to pass down knowledge, myths, and celestial observations, forming the foundation of what may have been early religious practices. Some anthropologists speculate that shamanic rituals played a central role in their society, with Göbeklitepe serving as a sacred space for spiritual leaders to connect with the unseen. The site itself consists of multiple circular enclosures, each framed by towering T-shaped megaliths weighing up to 50 tons. These stones, carefully quarried and transported from miles away, were arranged in intricate formations, hinting at a deep understanding of construction, balance, and spatial design. Each enclosure follows a distinct pattern: central monoliths flanked by smaller perimeter stones, all fitted with astonishing precision. Some believe these structures were roofed, creating darkened sanctuaries for rituals. Others propose that the open design served an astronomical function, aligning with celestial events. The pillars themselves bear detailed reliefs: ferocious lions, writhing serpents, elegant cranes, and strange humanoid figures. Some researchers believe they may encode ancient astronomical knowledge, tracking celestial events like solstices and eclipses. Others suggest they are warnings, symbols of mythological significance, passed down from an age before written history. Mystifying to archaeologists is just how these builders achieved such precision. Without metal tools, without the wheel, without even the organizational structures typically associated with such projects. Modern researchers speculate that they may have used ropes, levers, and sleds to maneuver the massive blocks. But without direct evidence, the question remains open. And then there's the greatest mystery of all: the deliberate burial. To understand why Göbekli Tepe was buried, we must first examine the evidence. Unlike sites that are overtaken by time, this structure was deliberately, methodically covered. Soil was packed tightly around the pillars, almost as if its builders sought to erase it from history. But what could compel an ancient civilization to conceal such an immense undertaking? Some scholars speculate that the people who created Göbekli Tepe may have been wiped out, their traditions lost to war, disease, or famine. Others suggest that a slow, grinding collapse, a shift in climate, or depleted resources forced them to abandon their sacred site. But there are other theories as well. Some archaeologists believe the burial was an intentional act of ceremonial decommissioning. Much like later cultures sealed off sacred sites upon completion of their spiritual purpose, Göbekli Tepe may have been ritually retired. It's possible that its builders believed that after serving generations of worshippers, the site had fulfilled its sacred duty. Certain indigenous traditions suggest that temples or ritual spaces are abandoned or sealed when their power wanes, either to honor the spirits within or to prevent misuse by outsiders. If this was the case, Göbekli Tepe's burial was not an act of erasure, but of preservation, a final offering to the gods or forces it once invoked. Another compelling theory is that Göbekli Tepe's builders faced a dire environmental crisis. Around 960 BC, the world was emerging from the last ice age, transitioning into a more stable climate. However, fluctuations in temperature and resources may have forced local groups to shift their priorities from constructing temples to securing food and shelter. As the landscape became less hospitable, the hunter-gatherers who built it may have struggled to maintain their way of life. Burying the site could have been an effort to protect it from the elements, in the hope that future generations might one day return to reclaim their lost sanctuary. Some theorists propose that the site was an astronomical observatory, tracking celestial bodies, solstices, and cosmic cycles. Ancient cultures often feared the misuse of sacred wisdom, knowledge deemed too powerful or dangerous for the uninitiated. Maybe there was a prophecy, an astronomical event, or a belief that the site's purpose had expired, necessitating its concealment. Some scholars draw comparisons to later cultures, where secretive priesthoods controlled astronomical and spiritual knowledge, revealing it only to those deemed worthy. The most tantalizing theory suggests that Göbekli Tepe was buried out of fear. But fear of what? Some researchers point to the possibility of an external threat, an approaching enemy, a cataclysmic event, or even something more mysterious. It's possible that an ancient war could have driven the builders to hide their knowledge, or they feared an apocalyptic event, one that required them to entomb their most sacred structures to safeguard them for future generations. As archaeologists dig deeper, new discoveries may reshape our understanding of the past. But for now, Göbekli Tepe remains an incredible archaeological site. Be sure to tell us what you think in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Until the next episode, stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Fireside. On October 24, 1593, a Spanish soldier named Gil Perez was stationed at the Palacio del Gobernador in Manila, part of the Captaincy General of the Philippines. The night before, Governor Gomez Perez das Marinas had been assassinated by Chinese pirates. Despite the turmoil, the palace guards remained at their posts, awaiting the appointment of a new governor. As Perez stood watch, he started feeling dizzy and was overcome with exhaustion. He leaned against a wall, closed his eyes, and allowed himself a moment to recover. When Perez opened his eyes just moments later, he was no longer in Manila. To his shock, he found himself in Mexico City, in the viceroyalty of New Spain, thousands of kilometers across the ocean. Disoriented and confused, he was quickly noticed by local guards, who became suspicious of his unfamiliar uniform and began questioning him. Unaware of how he had arrived there, Perez identified himself as a palace guard from Manila and spoke of Governor Dasmariñas' assassination, a piece of news that had not yet reached Mexico City. The authorities, skeptical of Perez's story, arrested him, accusing him of being a servant of the devil while officials investigated his claims. Months later, a galleon from the Philippines arrived in Mexico, and with it, bringing official news of Governor Dasmariñas' assassination. Among the passengers was a man who recognized Gil Perez and testified that he had seen him in Manila the day after the governor's death, an impossibility, given that Perez had been found in Mexico that same day. With this new evidence, the authorities had no choice but to release Perez, who was eventually allowed to return home. His bizarre and unexplained journey remains one of history's most puzzling stories, leaving open the question of how Gil Perez traveled thousands of kilometers in an instant. In the early hours of October 11, 1945, two police officers in Jacksonville, Illinois, discovered a young black teenager wandering the streets alone. It quickly became clear that he was deaf and unable to communicate verbally. When asked for his name, he could only write Lewis, which was believed to be his identity. However, no records or relatives could be found to confirm his background. With no way to determine his identity or family, a judge ordered him to be placed in the Illinois mental health system, where he would become known as John Doe 24, a name that would define the rest of his life. John Doe 24, believed to have been born in 1929, spent decades within the Illinois mental health system without a confirmed identity. In 1978, his name was legally changed to John Doe Boyd to enable him to apply for Social Security benefits, marking a small but significant step in officially recognizing his existence. After spending decades in mental health institutions, during which he gradually lost his sight, John Doe Boyd was transferred to the Smiley Living Center in Peoria, Illinois, in 1987. On November 28, 1993, Boyd passed away from a stroke at the estimated age of 64. To this day, no one knows who he truly was or where he came from, leaving behind a life of mystery and unanswered questions. Born near Lyon, France, sometime around 1772, Tarare was known as a man unlike any other in history, an anomaly for his insatiable hunger that defied any medical or logical reason. Beginning in his childhood, Tarare's hunger was relentless. By his teenage years, he could and would consume his own body weight in food each day. His never-ending appetite eventually became too much for his own family to handle. They were simply unable to financially keep up with his endless eating and kicked him out of the home. Forced to survive on the streets, Tarare joined a gang of thieves and beggars, scavenging and stealing just to feed his seemingly infinite appetite. But it wasn't long before he figured out how to turn his unique gift of eating into a spectacle, ultimately becoming a traveling performer who stunned crowds by his eating abilities, for both food and other items. He would eat stones, snakes, corks, and live animals. Despite his grotesque diet, Tarare remained strangely thin. But his overall appearance was far from ordinary. His mouth was unnervingly large, stretching nearly 4 inches wide, lined with stained teeth and thin lips. When hungry, his skin hung loose around his body, but after a feast, his stomach would swell like a massive balloon. His cheeks were so pliable he could stretch them to fit a dozen eggs or apples inside his mouth at once. But Tarare's bizarre ability to eat came at the cost of his physical health. His body was unnaturally hot to the touch, and he was constantly drenched in sweat. A foul, almost unbearable stench followed him everywhere, so overwhelming that people claimed they couldn't stand to be within 20 feet of him. And that was before a meal. After a meal, the odor only intensified. His eyes would redden, his cheeks flushed as if feverish, and a strange vapor seemed to rise from his skin. He would grow sluggish, belching loudly while his jaws moved in unconscious swallowing motions. However, Terrari's outside appearance refused to change in the long term. No matter how much he ate, he never gained weight. And though he was said to suffer from relentless diarrhea, he never seemed to grow weak. Those who knew him found no signs of madness in his behavior, only a strange, detached apathy, as if his mind, like his stomach, could never be satisfied. By 1792, Terrari found himself in an unexpected role, that of a soldier for the French Revolutionary Army. But the battlefield had no mercy for a man with his insatiable hunger. Even when his rations were quadrupled, it wasn't enough. Desperate, he scavenged through gutters and trash, eating whatever scraps he could find. Yet starvation still consumed him. Weak and malnourished, he collapsed from exhaustion and was sent to a military hospital. But Terrari was no ordinary patient. Military doctors, intrigued by his unnatural appetite, subjected him to a series of disturbing experiments. They tested the limits of his hunger, pushing him further each time. He devoured a meal meant for 15 men in a single sitting. He swallowed live cats, snakes, lizards, and even puppies. He was given eels, alive and writhing, and downed them whole without so much as a bite. Military surgeons, seeing an opportunity, proposed Terrari's unique eating ability be used for war. They presented him to French General Alexandre de Beauharnais with a daring plan. He would become a spy. His mission would be to swallow secret documents, slip behind enemy lines, and retrieve them once safely across. It seemed foolproof. But war has little patience for the bizarre. On his very first mission, Terrari was captured by Prussian forces. He was beaten mercilessly, interrogated, and subjected to a horrifying mock execution. Terrari stood at the brink of death, before at the last moment, the Prussians decided he was more pathetic than threatening, and they released him. Humiliated and broken after his failed mission, Terrari was desperate. He begged doctors to cure his unbearable hunger, submitting himself to any treatment they could devise. But nothing worked. No medicine, no diet, no desperate attempt to control his cravings could stop the insatiable void inside him. Unable to resist, he would sneak out of the hospital at night to linger outside local butcher shops, feasting on scraps like a starving animal. But it didn't stop there. Unsettling rumors began to spread like wildfire among the hospital staff. Some swore they saw him in the morgue, hovering over the dead, his rabid hunger driving him to feast on corpses. But then, the horror reached its peak. A 1-year-old child vanished from the hospital. There were no witnesses, no evidence, only suspicion. And all suspicion pointed to Terrari. The hospital had seen enough. A mob formed, chasing him from the grounds, driving him into the wilderness. And with that, Terrari disappeared. For 4 years, he was nothing more than a ghost. A monstrous legend whispered in the streets of France. Then, in 1798, he reappeared. Sick. Dying. His body, ravaged by tuberculosis, was finally failing him. In Versailles, weak and frail, Terrari succumbed to his fate. But even in death, his body held one final horror. During his autopsy, surgeons discovered the true extent of his condition. His throat, unnaturally wide, led directly to a stomach that dominated his entire abdominal cavity, stretched and ulcerated from years of unspeakable consumption. His organs, his liver, his gallbladder, were swollen and filled with pus, his insides corrupted beyond recognition. Terrari was a medical mystery, a man with a hunger that defied all logic. To this day, his story remains one of the most bizarre in history. The Countess of Desmond, believed to be a woman by the name of Catherine Fitzgerald, was a noblewoman of 16th and 17th century Ireland. What makes the Countess's story remarkable is the astonishing claim that she lived to be approximately 140 years old, a feat that sets her apart from almost every other historical figure. Writers from the time period documented that the Countess, even after her purported 100th birthday, would walk several miles every week to her local town market, demonstrating an impressive vitality well into her later years. One of the most well-known mentions of her age comes from Sir Walter Raleigh, the 17th century historian, who referenced her in his work, History of the World. Raleigh claimed that the Countess married during the reign of King Edward IV, which would have made her at least 135 years old when she passed away. The English writer Sir Francis Bacon also referenced the Countess of Desmond's extraordinary lifespan in his work History of Life, asserting that she was 140 years old at the time of her death. One of the most frequently cited stories surrounding her death is that the Countess tragically passed away after falling from a cherry tree at the age of 140. According to the tale, despite her advanced age, she was still active, climbing the tree to pick cherries when she lost her footing and fell to her death. However, the accuracy of these claims is nearly impossible to verify. Birth and death records from her time are scarce, and much of the information about her life and death comes from secondhand sources and writings that have been found from the time period. As a result, her true age at the time of her death remains a mystery. Fulcanelli is a name forever linked to alchemy, knowledge, and an unexplained disappearance for the ages. Fulcanelli is widely believed to have been a French alchemist and scholar active during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Yet his true identity remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Various theories suggest he may have been a nobleman, a scientist, or even a collective pseudonym used by multiple individuals. Some researchers speculate that Fulcanelli was actually Jules Violle, a renowned French physicist, while others argue he was Jean-Julien Champagne, an artist and alchemical enthusiast closely associated with Fulcanelli's work. Despite these theories, no definitive proof has ever surfaced. In life, Fulcanelli was best known for his two influential books on alchemy and sacred architecture. In these works, Fulcanelli proposed that medieval cathedral builders encoded alchemical secrets into stone, linking architecture to the transformation of matter. His ideas captivated occultists, scholars, and seekers of hidden knowledge. The mystery surrounding Fulcanelli is his sudden and unexplained disappearance in the 1920s. It's as if one day he simply disappeared off the face of the earth. His last known interaction was with his pupil, Eugène Concellier, who claimed that Fulcanelli had unlocked the secret of the Philosopher's Stone, the legendary substance said to turn base metals into gold and grant immortality. Rumors range from Fulcanelli becoming a reclusive exile to having achieved some form of transcendence. Decades would pass until, in 1954, Eugène Concellier reported an incredible encounter with Fulcanelli. According to Eugène Concellier, Fulcanelli appeared far younger than before, as though he had somehow reversed the aging process. This extraordinary claim only fueled speculation that Fulcanelli may have indeed discovered the secret to eternal life. Whether Fulcanelli was a genuine alchemist who mastered the secrets of transformation, or simply an intellectual who cleverly encoded his knowledge, his legend persists. Have you ever seen a painting that genuinely disturbs you? A painting that touches your soul in a way that leaves you unsettled? A work of art that sticks with you long after you've stopped looking at it, frozen in your mind like a vivid nightmare? Certain works seem to have an eerie presence about them, a strange aura. Among them is The Nightmare by Henry Fuseli, an unnerving depiction of sleep paralysis where a demon-like incubus looms over a lifeless dreamer. William Blake's The Ghost of a Flea was reportedly the result of a seance, a grotesque creature summoned into existence. Katsushika Hokusai's The Phantom of Kohara Koheiji tells the chilling tale of a murdered actor's vengeful spirit, forever haunting his killers. Francis Bacon's study after Velázquez's portrait of Innocent X transforms a revered papal portrait into a vision of existential terror, a scream trapped in silence. And then there is The Anguished Man, an ominous painting of unknown origin, rumored to be cursed and responsible for disturbing paranormal activity. Whether fueled by superstition, legend, or something far more inexplicable, they continue to captivate and unnerve those who dare to look. Let's explore them together on Fireside Unsolved, episode 153, 5 Strange and Mysterious Paintings in History, part 3. The Nightmare is a frightening oil painting created in 1781 by Swiss artist Henry Fuseli. This artwork depicts both aspects of experiencing a nightmare, illustrating the sleeping woman's physical reaction and the unsettling visions from her dream world. The painting is of a woman, sprawled across a bed. Her body is limp, and her head is dangling over the edge, exposing her neck. On her chest sits an evil-looking demon, with an unsettling stare directly at the observer. Henry Fuseli contrasts light and shadows with the pale figure of the woman set against deep reds, browns, and yellows. The room is richly decorated, with red velvet curtains cascading behind the bed. A small table nearby holds a mirror, a book, and a glass vial. Peering through a gap in the curtains, the unnerving ghostly head of a horse with wide, pupilless eyes. The connection between the demon and the horse, a mare, suggests a direct link to the concept of nightmares. The artist likely drew inspiration from his own experiences with sleep paralysis for the painting. During the time in the 18th century, these waking dreams were often associated with folklore, legend, and supernatural beliefs. The very word nightmare traces its origins to Mara, a spirit from Scandinavian mythology said to haunt and suffocate sleeping people. Historically, the term referred to both nightmares and sleep paralysis, marked by an oppressive weight on the chest, breathlessness, and an overwhelming sense of dread. Henry Fuseli, who was also an ordained minister, was deeply fascinated by the themes of sleep and dreams, though the nightmare stands out in his body of work for its absence of religious or literary references. The painting's unsettling atmosphere creates a sense of unease, and has made the nightmare one of the most chilling paintings in history. The Ghost of a Flea is a bizarre miniature painting by English poet, painter, and printmaker William Blake. Despite its small size, measuring just around 8.5 inches by 6 inches, or 21 centimeters by 16 centimeters, this work carries weighty presence. Completed between 1819 and 1820, it was part of a series of visionary heads, commissioned by watercolorist and astrologer John Varley. William Blake first met John Varley in the fall of 1818. Even though John was 21 years younger than William, he was an enthusiastic believer in astrology and the supernatural. And while he was deeply fascinated by spirits, to his frustration, he could not see them himself. William, on the other hand, claimed to have experienced visions since childhood. The two men developed an unusual ritual. They would gather at John's house, where Varley would attempt to summon the spirit of a historical or mythical figure. Once William said that he saw the apparition, he would quickly sketch what it looked like. It was during one of these sessions, late one night, that the Ghost of a Flea was born, solidifying William Blake's reputation as both an artist and a visionary. According to John Varley, the vision of a flea first appeared to Blake during a séance in 1819. Varley later recounted the encounter in vivid detail. As I was anxious to make the most correct investigation in my power of the truth of these visions, on hearing of the spiritual apparition of a flea, I asked him if he could draw for me the resemblance of what he saw. He instantly said, "I see him now before me." I therefore gave him paper and a pencil with which he drew the portrait. I felt convinced by his mode of proceeding that he had a real image before him, for he left off and began on another part of the paper to make a separate drawing of the mouth of the flea, which the spirit having opened, he was prevented from proceeding with the first sketch till he had closed it. In the painting, this grotesque, hideous, muscular creature looks like it's part human, part vampire, and part reptile. Its snake-like tongue extends outward, while its bulky neck supports a disproportionately small head with glaring eyes and open mouth. The flea strides ominously from right to left, framed by heavy, richly decorated curtains. In one hand, it clutches an acorn, and in the other, a thorn, both symbols commonly found in fairy lore. Blake's extraordinary perception of the supernatural was well documented, even beyond his artistic versions of them. He often claimed that as he sketched, he was accompanied by invisible sitters, figures from history and mythology, including angels, Voltaire, Moses, and even the flea itself. According to Blake, the flea revealed a dark secret. Fleas are inhabited by the souls of men who by nature are excessively bloodthirsty. After William Blake's passing, written in one of Blake's obituaries, a story was told about how one night the flea allegedly shared with him a memory from the moment of creation. At first, it was intended that I should be as large as a bullock. But upon realizing that, given my nature and strength, I would have become an unstoppable force of destruction, it was decided to make me no bigger than I am. With all that being said, during Blake's lifetime, his visions and supernatural works were often dismissed as the ramblings of a madman. His reputation for seeing spirits fueled speculation about his mental state. Few were willing to believe that the artist truly witnessed the things he claimed. But whether seen as genius or insanity, his work remains unforgettable. The Phantom of Kohara Koheiji is a strange and creepy painting by the renowned Japanese artist Katsushika Hokusai. While modern viewers may see this painting as vibrant and lively, Hokusai's contemporaries associated it with death and the supernatural. Originally intended as part of his series titled 100 Ghost Tales, from 1831 to 1832, the project was never fully completed, and only 5 prints from the collection are known to exist. The series title references a traditional Japanese parlor game in which participants would gather at night to share ghost stories. blowing out a candle after each tale until the room was plunged into complete darkness. This particular print depicts the chilling legend of Kohara Koheiji, a kabuki actor who was murdered by his wife's lover, drowned and left to die. However, his story did not end there. His vengeful spirit returned from beyond the grave, haunting the couple until his wife perished and her lover descended into madness before ultimately taking his own life. Study after Velázquez's portrait of Pope Innocent X is a 1953 painting by Francis Bacon, offering a reinterpretation of Diego Velázquez's 1650 masterpiece. Despite being known for his extravagant social life, Bacon was notoriously private about his artistic process, often destroying works that failed to meet his exacting standards. Many of his papal portraits never survived his own scrutiny. This unsettling work is one of the earliest in a series of nearly 50 variations on Velázquez's portrait that Bacon created throughout the 1950s and early 1960s. In this version, however, the Pope is depicted mid-scream, almost like his voice is trapped, muffled and swallowed by the deep, oppressive shadows that surround him. The dark background, combined with Bacon's rich, ominous color palette, transforms the normally dignified religious figure into a nightmarish specter. The figure in Bacon's version is unmistakably a pope, identified by his ceremonial vestments. Yet rather than exuding authority, he appears confined within an abstract enclosure. This framing device, referred to by art critic David Sylvester as a space frame, became a recurring motif in Francis Bacon's later work. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, Bacon frequently incorporated horizontal metal frames and draped curtains into his compositions. Many critics interpret Bacon's use of these frames as symbolic of imprisonment, reinforcing the figure's isolation and torment. He had been incorporating veils, screens, and drapery into his paintings since his 1949 study from the human body, always placing them in front of the subject rather than behind. When asked why he repeatedly returned to Velázquez's original portrait of Pope Innocent X, Bacon explained that his fascination had nothing to do with the subject matter itself. Rather, he saw it as an excuse to use these colors, and you can't give ordinary clothes that purple without getting into a sort of false fauve manner. This reveals Bacon's deep preoccupation with color, form, and psychological intensity, elements that make his Pope series some of the most haunting images in modern art. The Anguished Man is infamous, not only for its eerie appearance, but also for the chilling legend that surrounds it. The person behind the Anguished Man remains unknown, but the story goes that the artist mixed their own blood into the paint while creating the haunting image of a bald, noseless figure caught in a silent scream. Soon after completing the piece, the artist allegedly took their own life, leaving behind the painting. In 2010, the Anguished Man came into the possession of Sean Robinson, who claims to have inherited it from his grandmother. According to Robinson, she had kept the painting locked away for years, convinced that it carried a curse and brought misfortune. When Robinson finally displayed it in his home, he and his family reportedly began experiencing a string of terrifying phenomena. Shadowy figures lurking in the darkness, eerie moans and screams echoing through the house, and an unshakable feeling of being watched. With its disturbing history and the unsettling stories it has inspired, the painting remains one of the most mysterious and feared artworks in modern folklore. Unsolved murders hold a unique grip on the public imagination. They are stories without endings, questions without answers, and reminders that justice is not always served. Cold cases, especially those that remain a mystery for decades, become more than just investigations. They turn into ghost stories, legends, and folklore. One such case is the 1977 murder of Jenny Lo Chang, a crime that has baffled investigators for nearly half a century. Found under circumstances that are perplexing as they were tragic, her death remains haunting and unexplained. Despite efforts by law enforcement, private investigators, and armchair detectives, no definitive answers have emerged. Who killed Jenny Lo Chang and why was she murdered? As time moves forward, her story remains frozen in the past, until today, when we investigate the case ourselves. On Fireside Unsolved, Episode 154, The Unsolved Murder of Jenny Lo Chang. Jenny Lo Chang was born on February 5, 1958 in Los Angeles, California. She was the daughter of Chinese immigrants who had come to the United States in the early 1920s in search of new opportunities and a better future. Like many immigrant families, Jenny's parents worked hard to establish themselves, instilling in their children the values of perseverance, education, and ambition. Growing up in a household that placed a strong emphasis on academic success and personal growth, Jenny embraced these ideals from an early age. Described as intelligent, hardworking, and deeply focused on her studies, Jenny excelled in school, consistently earning top marks. She was known for her quiet determination and strong work ethic, setting her sights on a future where she could make a difference in people's lives. Those who knew her recall a young woman with big dreams, someone who was both disciplined and driven to succeed. In 1975, Jenny Lo Chang achieved a significant milestone when she was accepted into San Francisco State University. For her, higher education was not just a personal goal, but also a way to honor the sacrifices her immigrant parents had made to provide her with opportunities they never had. By 1977, Jenny was a dedicated pre-dental student and had chosen to pursue the field because it combined her passion for healthcare, science, and helping others. Her hard work and commitment set her apart, and she was well on her way to achieving her dream of becoming a dentist. She consistently earned top grades, securing a place on the university's dean's list every semester. Friends and classmates described her as focused and driven, yet kind and approachable. On the evening of September 11, 1977, a seemingly ordinary Sunday, 19-year-old Jenny Lo Chang left her dormitory around 6 p.m., books in hand, and told her roommate she was heading to the library to study. Jenny often spent long hours preparing for her coursework, so her decision to use the library's quiet study rooms was nothing out of the ordinary. Sunday hours meant that only the basement level of the campus library remained open, offering study rooms available until 11 p.m. that evening. By Monday morning, unease settled over Jenny's dorm room when her roommate, expecting to see her back from the library the night before, was alarmed to find that Jenny's bed looked untouched. At first, she may have hoped for a reasonable explanation, but as the hours passed with no sign of her, worry turned to fear. Realizing something was wrong, her roommate reported Jenny missing, prompting campus authorities to launch an investigation. At first, there was hope that she would turn up safe, that some misunderstanding had led to her absence. But as more time passed, and no one had seen or heard from Jenny, it became clear that something far more serious had happened. At the same time, on the other side of campus, the routine of Monday morning was shattered by a gruesome discovery. A psychology professor entering a faculty reading room on the 4th floor of the library stumbled upon a horrific scene: Jenny Lo Chang's lifeless body. Jenny had been viciously attacked, suffering 30 stab wounds to her chest and heart. As if the ferocity of the stabbing wasn't enough, she had also been bludgeoned with a heavy object, later believed to be an ashtray. The viciousness of the attack suggested the killer was filled with an overwhelming rage, inflicting cruelty that went far beyond what was necessary to end her life. Some reports suggest that Jenny may have also been strangled and that there were indications of an assault, though these claims have never been officially confirmed. What was undeniable, however, was the sheer brutality of the attack. The excessive violence, 30 stab wounds, and blunt force trauma pointed to a deeply personal or frenzied motive. Yet Jenny had no known enemies and led a quiet, studious life. Next to Jenny's body laid her books and her clothing, neatly stacked as if someone had put them there deliberately. The first mystery investigators needed to solve was how Jenny ended up in the faculty reading room, a restricted area requiring a key for entry, and how her killer gained access. As a student, Jenny was unlikely to have possessed a key of her own, raising the question of whether she was led there by someone she trusted or if she unknowingly walked into danger. Authorities soon learned that approximately 400 people across the university had keys to the room where she had been murdered. This initially seemed like a promising lead, but it also posed a major challenge. Narrowing down the list of potential suspects from such a large pool was no simple task. Furthermore, investigators couldn't rule out the possibility that the door had simply been left ajar or deliberately propped open, allowing anyone to enter without restriction. Despite thorough questioning of students, faculty, and staff, no one recalled seeing or hearing anything unusual that night. There were no reported disturbances, no cries for help, no suspicious figures lurking in the library. Jenny had no known enemies, no history of conflicts, and nothing in her personal life suggested she had been in danger. With no witnesses, no clear motive, and no physical evidence linking anyone to the crime, the investigation quickly stalled. Leads dried up, and speculation replaced solid answers. Before long, Jenny Lo Chang's murder faded into the growing list of cold cases, leaving behind a chilling, unresolved mystery that would haunt the university for decades to come. Over the years, Jenny Lo Chang's murder has drawn comparisons to the murders of some of California's most infamous serial killers of the 1960s and 70s. Among the names frequently mentioned are the Zodiac Killer and Rodney Alcala, both of whom were active during that time and known for their calculated, sadistic crimes. Given the excessive violence of Jenny's attack, 30 stab wounds and signs of severe beating, many have speculated that her murder could have been the work of a serial predator. However, the Zodiac Killer, who terrorized Northern California in the late 1960s, was known crimes primarily involved shootings, not the brutal stabbing and bludgeoning that Jenny endured. Similarly, Rodney Alcala, often referred to as the dating game killer, was active during the 1970s and was known for luring young women to their deaths. His crimes did involve brutal violence, often strangulation and beating, but there is no definitive link between him and Jenny's case. More often than not, the simplest explanation is the most likely. Given that access to the faculty reading room required a key, many believe that Jenny's killer was someone connected to the university, perhaps a staff member, faculty member, or even a student worker with the ability to enter unnoticed. The possibility that an outsider stumbled upon an unlocked door cannot be ruled out, but the idea that Jenny's murderer may have been someone who walked those halls daily is a chilling thought. If that was the case, her killer may have continued working or studying at the university, blending into campus life while harboring a terrible secret. Strangely, no one at the library that night recalled seeing her. There were no reports of students or staff interacting with her, no confirmed sightings, and no physical evidence placing her inside the building at all. With so many unknowns, investigators struggled to piece together Jenny's final moments. Theories swirled, but hard evidence was scarce. And as time passed, the truth of what really happened that night seemed to slip further and further away. One of the few potential suspects in Jenny Lo Chang's case was a security guard working at San Francisco State University on the night she was murdered. Reports indicate that he left his shift early without notice, a suspicious and highly unusual action for someone tasked with maintaining campus safety. His abrupt departure raised immediate concerns, and as a result of his unexplained absence, he was dismissed from his position. Given that the faculty reading room required a key for access, investigators considered the possibility that he may have been involved. As a security guard, he likely had access to restricted areas, making it plausible that he could have entered the locked room where Jenny was found. However, despite these concerning circumstances, there was no physical evidence tying him to the crime. Without forensic proof or witness testimony linking him directly to the murder, authorities were unable to build a case against him. As the years stretched into decades, Jenny's murder has remained an unsolved tragedy that has left her loved ones without answers and her killer unpunished. If you or anyone you know has information regarding the murder of Jenny Lo Chang, please contact the San Francisco State University Police Department. Even the smallest detail could be the key to unlocking the mystery and bringing long overdue justice to a case that has remained unsolved for far too long. Some mysteries defy all logical explanation, and today's case fits that description. On this episode, we look into the unsolved disappearance of Juan Pedro Martinez, a 10-year-old boy who vanished from the site of a horrific truck accident in the Somosierra mountain pass in Spain. What should have been a tragic but straightforward crash investigation quickly spiraled into one of the strangest missing persons cases in European history. Despite an extensive search and thousands of leads, Juan Pedro was never seen again following the crash. His case remains one of Interpol's most baffling unsolved mysteries, a case where every theory seems more unsettling than the last. Welcome back to Fireside Unsolved, episode 155, The Unexplained Disappearance of Juan Pedro Martinez, the boy from Somosierra. Born on January 1st, 1976, Juan Pedro was the only child of Andres and Carmen Martinez. The family lived in Murcia, a quiet city in southeastern Spain where life was simple and predictable. Andres worked as a tanker truck driver, often spending long hours on the road, while Carmen took care of their home. Juan Pedro was a bright and well-behaved child, studious, curious, and eager to learn about the world beyond his small hometown. He loved to read and had a restless sense of adventure, always asking questions about places he had never seen. In June 1986, his father offered him an experience most 10-year-olds could only dream of. Andres had a long-haul delivery to make in northern Spain, and as a reward for his son's excellent grades, he invited Juan Pedro to come along for the ride. It would be a chance to see landscapes far different from the dry, sun-baked terrain of Murcia. Lush green valleys, rolling pastures, and dairy farms with the cows that fascinated him. His mother, Carmen, would also join them, turning the work trip into a rare family adventure. On June 24th, they set off in Andres' massive tanker truck, carrying nearly 20,000 liters, over 5,000 gallons, of highly toxic sulfuric acid. Their journey would take them over 800 kilometers, or 500 miles, from Murcia to the northern port city of Bilbao. For Andres, it was a familiar route, one he had driven many times before. But for Juan Pedro, it was the trip of a lifetime. He sat eagerly in the truck's cab, entertaining himself with his favorite audiobooks on cassette, staring out the window as they made their way north. The last confirmed sighting of the Martinez family took place in the early morning hours of June 25, 1986. At approximately 5:30 a.m., they stopped for breakfast at a roadside restaurant along the N1 motorway near the municipality of Cabanillas de la Sierra. For the most part, it seemed to be a brief and uneventful stop. The waiter who served them recalled only one detail stood out in his memory: Juan Pedro. The boy had been dressed entirely in red. Otherwise, there was nothing unusual about the family, just a father, mother, and child quietly sharing a meal. Then around an hour later, tragedy struck. At approximately 6:30 a.m., as they navigated the winding roads of the Somosierra mountain pass, something went terribly wrong. Andres lost control of the massive tanker truck on a curve, sending the vehicle careening off the road. Within moments, it overturned, spilling its dangerous cargo and bringing the family's journey to a violent and catastrophic end. As emergency personnel arrived at the scene, the wreckage of the tanker truck told a tragic story. Inside the cab, they found the lifeless bodies of Andres and Carmen. Both had died instantly upon impact, their lives taken in the blink of an eye. The tank, which had ruptured during the crash, had spilled sulfuric acid, further disfiguring the bodies of the couple. The corrosive substance made an already horrific accident even more devastating. Among the scattered wreckage, authorities discovered a few unexpected items: cassettes and a set of young boys' clothes. But what they failed to realize in that moment was that the couple hadn't been alone. It wasn't until later, when the authorities reached out to Carmen's mother, Maria, to inform her of her daughter and son-in-law's deaths, that the full scope of the tragedy began to unravel. "And the boy?" Maria asked. "Where is my grandson? What happened to Juan Pedro?" Law enforcement conducted an extensive search of the area utilizing horses, dogs, motorbikes, and helicopters, but found no sign of the missing boy anywhere. Investigators considered the possibility that Juan Pedro's body might have been dissolved by the sulfuric acid. However, this theory was soon discredited by expert chemists, who explained that a body would need to be totally submerged in the substance for a complete dissolution to occur. Additionally, help had arrived too quickly for such a thing to have the time it would need to take place. Juan Manuel Sanchez, the civil guard captain in charge of the search, said, "We spent more than 2 months going from bush to bush around that point in the Sierra. We couldn't rule out the possibility that the little one got scared and ran through the mountains, but there was no sign of it within a radius of 30 kilometers. Investigators made the decision to dismantle the truck, hoping to uncover any possible mechanical issues or signs of malfunction that could explain the crash. The truck had recently passed a thorough safety inspection, and upon re-examination, it became clear that there were no apparent issues with the brakes or the engine. Everything seemed in working order. The investigators at the accident scene determined that the truck had been traveling at a speed of approximately 140 kilometers per hour, or 86 miles per hour, when it suddenly skidded and overturned. This was significantly faster than the vehicle should have been going, especially considering the conditions on the road. The investigators now had a crucial question on their hands. Why was the truck traveling at such a high rate of speed? Further examination of the truck's tachometer revealed another curious detail. In the final 8-mile stretch before the crash, the vehicle had made 12 short stops, all within a relatively brief span of time. The vehicle had not left the motorway at any point, and there had been very little traffic that morning, which made the frequent halts even more perplexing. Then, authorities stumbled upon a discovery that would completely alter the course of their inquiry. Trace amounts of illegal substances were found in the wreckage of the truck. This revelation was shocking to everyone involved. Neither Andres nor Carmen had any known history of illicit involvement with substances. Neither were suspected of dealing or using. But as investigators delved deeper, the family revealed that Andres had, in fact, been coerced into transporting illicit cargo to northern Spain by a local drug smuggling ring. As if the situation weren't perplexing enough, eyewitnesses soon came forward with an even more bizarre twist. On the morning of the crash, 2 unidentified individuals in a white Nissan Vanette were spotted near the wreckage. According to witnesses, an elderly woman, claiming to be a nurse, and her male companion appeared at the crash site shortly after the accident occurred. They scoured the wreckage for a brief period before emerging with a bundle, possibly Juan Pedro, and placed it inside their van. The 2 then quickly drove off, disappearing into the distance. With this disturbing new lead, the police launched an extensive search, focusing on over 3,000 white Nissan Vanettes, the vehicle seen at the scene. Despite their efforts, they came up empty-handed. No trace of the van, the elderly woman, or the male companion could be found. As the investigation unfolded, police speculated that another vehicle, likely containing criminals affiliated with the drug smuggling ring, had been tailing Andres' truck throughout his journey. The purpose of this surveillance, authorities believed, was to monitor Andres' progress as he transported the cargo. The theory suggested that the pressure and anxiety from being followed, combined with the high stakes of the mission, might have contributed to Andres losing control of the truck, which led to the tragic accident. But another theory began to emerge, one even more sinister. Investigators wondered if members of the drug ring had forced Andres to stop, perhaps as a way of seizing Juan Pedro to ensure that Andres would not back out of completing his smuggling mission. The child's abduction, it seemed, could have been a calculated move to control Andres' actions. The theory posited that, in a panic to retrieve his son, Andres might have tried to pursue the criminals, only to lose control of the vehicle in his desperate attempt to get Juan Pedro back. It was at this moment that the crash occurred, sending the truck into a violent skid and overturning on the road. In the days following the accident, numerous sightings of Juan Pedro surfaced across Spain. People claimed to have seen the missing child in various locations, each sighting adding to the confusion. One particularly puzzling report placed Juan Pedro in Madrid, where he was allegedly seen with an elderly blind woman. However, despite these reports, none of the sightings could be corroborated or substantiated with any concrete evidence. Despite the many theories and possible leads, law enforcement has been unable to prove any of them. No solid leads have emerged, and the young boy has never been found. His family, devastated by his sudden disappearance, still holds out hope, clinging to the belief that one day, somehow, they will find him. The case of Juan Pedro Martinez, also known as the boy from Somosierra, has become known as one of the most puzzling and unsettling missing persons cases in European history. Despite extensive efforts by local authorities and international agencies, including Interpol, the mystery remains unsolved to this day. As the years go by, the questions surrounding Juan Pedro's fate live on, leaving those who loved him still yearning for a resolution that, as of now, appears increasingly out of reach. In Sri Lanka, there is a 40-acre area known as Ranmasu Uyana, or the Golden Fish Park, an ancient urban oasis surrounded by 3 Buddhist temples. This incredible garden, also known as Magul Uyana, or the Royal Gardens, is full of historical features, some of which is still unexplained. At the center of the park, now often called Royal Goldfish Park, you'll find the carving known as Sakwala Chakraya, which means universe cycle in Sinhalese. This shallow engraving is about 7 feet across and is set into a rock face. There has been speculation of what the carving could be a depiction of. Some believe the carving's pattern could represent a map of the cosmos, with concentric circles symbolizing the cycles of the universe, or the interconnectedness of all things. Others maintain that it could be a representation of the heavens, or even an ancient navigational tool of some kind. Then, there is a group of people that believe it could be a stargate. A stargate is a concept drawn from science fiction. It's an ancient portal that facilitates near-instantaneous travel across space and time. The dating of the carving is one of the greatest obstacles to understanding its true purpose. Estimates suggest that the Sakwala Chakraya was created sometime between 250 BC and the 7th century, a period when the royal gardens were being expanded and new structures were added. But the exact date is still uncertain, especially since there are no historical records mentioning the carving, its purpose, or even its existence. Despite the meticulous record-keeping by Buddhist monks of the era, no text has emerged to explain this strange feature. Whether it's an ancient map, a cosmic blueprint, or a lost key to the universe, the Sakwala Chakraya remains a mystery. Deep in the hillside in the Lot department of France, there's an incredible cave complex called Pechmerle. This cave system, which stretches over 2 kilometers, over a mile, is like a time capsule from more than 20,000 years ago. It's filled with different levels, caverns, wells, and winding tunnels, each holding evidence of ancient human life. Over the years, rainwater and mudslides sealed off parts of the cave, keeping it extremely well preserved. It was rediscovered in 1922 by 3 teenagers, but the cave itself is over 2 million years old. Carved by an underground river, the cave system provided a safe haven for early humans, offering cool and dry chambers to live during the Ice Age. The murals in Pechmerle date back to the Gravettian culture, around 27,000 years ago, with some possibly from the later Magdalenian period, about 20,000 years ago. These paintings cover the walls of 7 chambers, showing lifelike images of mammoths, horses, reindeer, bison, and even human handprints. Amazingly, footprints of children have been found preserved in ancient clay, more than 800 meters deep, an amazing 2,600 feet underground. One of the most famous paintings in the cave is called The Dappled Horses of Pechmerle, estimated to have been created approximately 25,000 years ago. These spotted horses look a lot like modern-day Appaloosas. A 2011 study of ancient horse DNA revealed that these horses likely had the genetic trait for spots, suggesting the artist painted what they actually saw in the wild. Another intriguing discovery in the cave is a handprint, estimated to be around 20,000 years old. The size and shape of the hand suggest it belonged to a female artist. Similar handprints have been found in caves worldwide, often thought to be the signatures of the artists of the cave art. Pechmerle is proof that even during the cold, harsh Ice Age, humans found ways to not only survive but also express themselves creatively. The Baigong pipes are a perplexing and controversial set of pipe-like structures found on White Mountain in the Dalinga region of China. These formations have attracted significant attention due to their unusual characteristics, mysterious origins, and the debates surrounding them. The pipes are associated with 3 caves on the front face of White Mountain, although only the largest cave is accessible. The 2 smaller caves have collapsed over time. Inside the largest cave, 2 pipe-like structures were discovered, one of which measures approximately 40 centimeters, 16 inches, in diameter. When nearby stones were analyzed, they were found to contain 30% ferric oxide, which is oxidized iron, along with significant amounts of silicon dioxide and calcium oxide. These findings suggest that the pipes and objects might have formed through geological processes, possibly linked to natural formations like calcite or concretions. In 2003, an article reported that Chinese scientists used atomic emission spectroscopy on the Baigong pipes and found traces of organic matter, including plant material. Tree rings were even discovered in certain sections of the pipes, leading researchers to hypothesize that the pipes could be fossilized trees or tree roots, possibly from an ancient forest that had since disappeared. Further investigation in 2007 by a researcher from the Chinese Earthquake Administration revealed that some of the pipes were highly radioactive. The lack of definitive evidence to explain their exact origin, function, and age leaves them open to ongoing speculation and curiosity. Tassili Najer, known as the Plateau of Rivers, is a massive mountain range in the southeastern Sahara Desert of Algeria, covering over 72,000 square kilometers, or close to 28,000 square miles, around the size of South Carolina. The paintings found in Tassili Najer is crucial for understanding the development of animal husbandry and the evolution of travel across the Sahara. Dating back to around 12,000 years ago, when the Sahara was a lush savanna, the artwork shows a time before it became the desert we know today. With over 15,000 paintings and engravings found so far, the art depicts everything from large wild animals like antelopes and crocodiles to humans hunting, dancing, and going about their daily lives. These works are some of the earliest examples of Central Saharan art and have made the region a global treasure of prehistoric culture. The art at Tassili Najer is categorized into 5 major eras, each reflecting shifts in both the environment and the societies that created them. The first period, called the Archaic period, was around 12,000 years ago. This early period features engravings of large wild animals and geometric patterns, showing the abundant wildlife before the Sahara dried out. Next, the Roundhead period, around 8,000 years ago, features humanoid figures with round, featureless heads and formless bodies, often shown with wild animals. Their meaning and purpose still the subject of much speculation. The Pastoral period is next, which started approximately 6,000 years ago. As the Sahara became more arid, domesticated animals became central to life, and the art reflects it. The art shows domesticated animals like dogs, cattle, and goats, along with human figures involved in herding, hunting, and family activities. 3,000 years ago, Tassili Najer entered the horse tradition era, as the Sahara fully transitioned into a desert environment, and the use of horses and chariots for transportation became a vital aspect of life. The paintings from this phase are dynamic and active, showing galloping horses and mounted riders. Inscriptions hinting at early written language can also be found, though they are still undeciphered. The final phase is named the Camel Tradition period and was 1,600 years ago. As trade routes developed, camels became the main mode of desert travel, and the art shows mounted men with shields, spears, and swords. The wild animal depictions become more rudimentary, reflecting the changing priorities of the people as trade and mobility took priority. Today, Tassili Najer and its rock art offers an incredible window into the past, showcasing the rich cultural heritage of this fascinating region. In the heart of southern Anatolia, Turkey, lies one of the largest and most significant ancient settlements ever uncovered, Çatalhöyük. This amazing prehistoric site flourished nearly 9,000 years ago, around 7100 BC. For centuries, this community thrived on the banks of the Çarşamba River. The rich clay, silt, and nutrient-filled sediment provided a perfect foundation for early agriculture. By 5000 BC, however, the settlement was mysteriously abandoned. Archaeologists have uncovered a total of 18 separate layers of ruins at the site, with each generation building on top of the last, spanning over 1,500 years. What sets Çatalhöyük apart from many other ancient settlements is its unique layout. Instead of public buildings, the settlement consisted entirely of tightly packed homes, creating a maze-like structure where streets were non-existent. Without separation between dwellings, the inhabitants moved across rooftops to enter their homes through ceiling openings. This remarkable design fostered a tight-knit community where trade, support, and even the arrangement of marriages were organized. The homes were arranged in clusters and separated by a gully, suggesting 2 distinct groups that intermarried. This allowed the settlement to grow over generations, despite the absence of any other neighboring communities. But it's not just the architecture that makes Çatalhöyük remarkable. The people here practiced complex rituals, as seen in their treatment of the dead. The remains of their loved ones were often buried beneath the floors of homes and under hearths. Some skulls have been found to have been removed from their bodies, then plastered and painted with ochre, a practice that has been seen in many ancient sites far beyond Çatalhöyük. Art also flourished in this settlement. Vibrant murals adorned both interior and exterior walls. Scenes of hunting, wild cattle, and stags captured the daily life and beliefs of these people. Over 2,000 figurines, crafted from a variety of materials including clay, schist, and alabaster, have been discovered at the site, predominantly depicting animals. This abundance of animal figures hints at the community's connection to nature and the spiritual importance they placed on these creatures. Today, Çatalhöyük is a place where one of humanity's earliest civilizations still resonate, offering a glimpse into a time long, long ago.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Fireside Unsolved. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to help the channel grow. Until next time, take it easy and be easy, you filthy bastards.